Ah, yes. Another action game in which you play a heroine with very little clothing because somehow this makes sense as she's hacking and slashing creatures with incredibly sharp claws. Blades of Time, a game where you wield blades and play with time. Yeah, if you can't tell, I'm struggling to come up with a really good intro here. Anywho, let's get right into the game. You play as Ayumi, a female warrior with Lara Croft syndrome that belongs to some mysterious guild. The guild master seems to be playing with some dangerous force in the form of a globe of energy, and somehow unleashes the ability to transport people to a place generically called Dragonland. Ayumi warps there prior to stopping the guild master, and now needs to find her way back home. But there's a bit of a problem. There's lots of creatures in this obscure world that want her dead. Not to mention there's a war going on between two factions, the Chaos Forces and the Skyguard. Chaos are your standard warped creatures with claws and fangs, and the Skyguard seem to be the protectors of Dragonland, clad in massive silver armor and wielding deadly spears. Either way, neither of these guys want Ayumi around. From the start of the game, Ayumi is introduced to two, shall we say, characters that want to help her. One is a spirit that inhabits an altar, named Altar. Yeah, the developers of the game didn't really go out of their way to name stuff in an interesting way, but I can't say I could do much better. Anyway, this altar allows Ayumi to upgrade her abilities by spending chi. These shrines are at specific points of the game, and oddly enough, Ayumi always gives all of her experience to it at this time. Even stranger, you can't see how much chi you are carrying, yet enemies and objects clearly give you chi when defeated. Also, am I pronouncing chi right? Somehow, I don't think I am. Anyway, you just choose upgrades, such as the power to throw flame or frost, power increases, or so on, and then Ayumi moves on. It's definitely a confusing system. The other character you run into is not named, but introduces herself as the spirit of the dragon. She clearly looks similar to Ayumi, and helps keep Ayumi focused on her task at hand, explaining things that are going on in Dragonland. Right from the start, you know there's a secret that she's hiding, which I won't explain because, spoilers. She does also help Ayumi in combat if you upgrade an ability for her with Altar, allowing the spirit to draw enemies' attacks and strike herself if your health gets low with no healing points available. With that said, I should probably talk about the combat. It's clearly done in the God of War / Devil May Cry style. You have light and heavy attacks, although heavy attacks are very limited in their use since there's not really any real advanced combos to unleash. I used an Xbox controller to play the game, so what I'm about to say pertains to that, although obviously the game supports keyboard and mouse controls too. Pressing the right trigger allows you to do an evading dash, which is nearly required at times since you can't outright block enemy attacks. Weaken an enemy enough, and you can press the right button to finish them off. R1 is also used to counter certain monster attacks, and those are the basics of combat. But the big thing that the game tries to introduce is the combo gauge. By striking enemies successfully, you'll see the meter under your health begin to build up. At certain points, an ability is unlocked for use. 5 or so slashes on your opponent will allow you to use a basic magical attack, performed by pressing B and then another face button. Get another 7 attacks in and you'll be able to perform a more devastating magical blast, done by holding B before pressing the face button. These high-leveled abilities aren't unlocked until much further into the game though, so you won't be doing these in the first few stages. Finally, max out the meter and you'll gain a healing point, at which time the meter resets, although the magical strikes are kept until you use them. Getting healing points are incredibly important. Although Ayumi heals automatically outside of combat, it's during the fights that you need to be careful. I mean, duh. Ayumi can store up to 3 healing points, and can be used at the push of a button. If she dies, which will happen often, she loses any healing points that she accumulated, which is pretty dumb. Dying happens frequently because the enemies in this game do not play around. Maybe it's the aforementioned lack of armor, but Ayumi takes a lot of damage anytime an enemy hits her. It's not uncommon to be hit once and lose a quarter to a half of your health bar. It's kind of ridiculous, almost like the developers wanted Dark Souls style difficulty in a God of War style game. I can't even imagine what the harder difficulty is like. What compounds this a bit is the fact that when jumping or dashing, there is a noticeable pause when the maneuver is completed. This means that if you leap or dive in the wrong direction, you might cause more harm than good. I can understand the pause after the evasion technique, so that you don't spam it to completely avoid damage. But the jump? Come on. Jumping is also very finicky. There are several platforming puzzles, and it's very easy to fall to your death during them due to a lack of distance with the jump. There are also puzzles that make use of your time altering ability. Oh, I didn't mention that yet, did I? You probably should have expected something to do with time mechanics because, Blades of Time? Anywho, Ayumi gets the ability to rewind time by the spirit of the dragon, which is used both in and out of combat. Most of the puzzles that use it are simplistic: step on a switch for a few seconds, go to the next switch, and rewind time so both are hit at the same time, or use the door lever, run to the door, rewind time so I can get through the door before it closes kind of puzzles. In combat, some enemies force you to do the rewind so that your clones can double, triple, or even quadruple the damage output. This is forced on you when going up against armored enemies. For some reason, Ayumi can't damage them herself, so you just pull out your gun, keep shooting them, rewind, and repeat. The overabundance of bullets will destroy the shield, allowing you to fight the enemy as normal. I will admit that the time rewinding is very gimmicky feeling. It's like the game just throws in these puzzles and shielded enemies just to keep things fresh, instead of giving you unique enemies to fight. The massive behemoth Skyguard commanders, who heal up their damage, also require the time rewind to defeat, although these are incredibly annoying because I never quite figured out the actual technique to defeating them. There are also puzzles in which you need to push an orb around by pressing up. These are the worst in the game. The game doesn't explicitly tell you how to move these orbs, and it seems to move to random pedestals. Usually when this is happening, enemies will constantly be spawning in, which gets even more frustrating when you try to move an orb to finish the puzzle, and it goes backwards, and then you die because you had low health. There's also a few puzzles in which you need to push the orb to make electrical connections, but I needed a guide to get through this because I had no idea what I was supposed to do. The spirit likes to give random useless information, so maybe a hint or something here and there would have been nice. Being that Ayumi is a treasure hunter, she's on the lookout for hidden treasure chests that can be spotted using her compass. When you see it start to emit a signal, you'll know that there's a chest nearby. A lot of the items increase Ayumi's abilities, such as higher fire strength, giving elemental edge to her blades, or even the coveted increase of health. Although truthfully, I can't say that I noticed much of a difference with the heightened health bar. Still, it does give you a reason to explore the world at least a little bit. And this is fine, because I think the high point to Blades of Time is the world itself. It is a beautifully crafted environment, complete with lush forests, ruins that are surrounded by gray slabs of stone, and a sky garden featuring rushing waterfalls. It's honestly what kept me going through the 10-level, 8-hour journey. I wanted to know what kind of environment I was going to explore next. I will admit that the desert with extreme heat, in which Ayumi takes hefty damage when she escapes the shade of objects, was my least favorite, but I do like the idea. One last thing before I wrap up this review. Ayumi likes to talk. Like, a lot. She always has some sort of remark whenever entering a new room, and at times comes off as kind of whiny. It doesn't detract from the game or anything, but it's just like, come on, shut up. To me, Blades of Time was just a mediocre game with a few interesting ideas that felt a bit half-baked. It's just a normal, run-of-the-mill action game through an amazingly crafted world. The time rewind is kind of awkward to use, and the delay after jumping is kind of confusing. The story is semi-interesting, but overall it didn't keep me invested enough to keep me glued to my seat. The game typically runs for $10 on Steam, which is a fair price for it. If you are looking for a new action game for a weekend, you could do worse, but don't have high expectations. Final score? 4 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.